Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Tony D's channel, and thank you for watching. I have now seen the film Power to the People, John Lennon Yoko Ono, live in New York City twice in the past week, and I am absolutely thrilled. I'm going to tell you all my thoughts about it now. So, this film is the entire concert. Well, okay, not the entire concert, but it's the concert that John Lennon Yoko Ono did to benefit the poor, underdeveloped, underfunded orphanage called Willowbrook, an orphanage for severely mentally challenged children. John Lennon heard about this from a news report on TV by Geraldo Rivera, who back in the 70s was a legit newscaster. Then 50 or so years later, he turned to a Fox News hack, and that's a bad story there. But anyway, Geraldo Rivera is the reason this benefit concert happened in the first place. But John wanted to help, obviously, and the film starts out with John announcing that this concert had sold out, and there were two shows, and then we get right into the concert, and you see people in the crowd, and then it starts with the chant of the song Power to the People. It's not the full song Power to the People, it's just the part of the intro, and then it goes into the awesome rocker New York City. The song where John Lennon pretty much tells you everything that's happened since him and Yoko Ono moved to New York City. About him meeting David Peel, meeting Jerry Rubin, Bobby Seale, and just his love for New York City. It's one of his best songs, honestly. It's a song with both a guitar solo and a piano solo. You can't beat that. And John is just rocking out on all four cylinders in that song. It reminds me of that Alan Parsons Project song, Damn It If I Do, which has a guitar solo and a string solo in it. And this song has a guitar solo and a piano solo. Now, I do want to mention the band that played at this concert. John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band, Elephant's Memory, and special guest. Elephant's Memory was this amateurish rock band in New York City that John met when he moved over there. And it's hard to say why, but for some reason he liked them and wanted to help them out. And these guys were so novice, they were just honored to be playing with a former Beatle. And they were thrilled to be there. You know, they had Frank Rich on drums, Stan Bronstein on the saxophone, and I gotta say, I'm a defender and a lover of the saxophone in pop rock songs. I love it. Wayne Tex Gabriel on guitar, Adam Ippolito on organ and piano, Gary Von Syak on bass, John Ward on bass. You know, they weren't the greatest band that played with John, but I think they were good for what this concert was. I really do enjoy the horns, I do. But as well as these guys, you also had the legendary Jim Kellner on drums. Jim Kellner is one of the greatest musicians you've never heard of. I say that ironically. But he started his career as a session drummer in the 70s, and always was that. I think he was on George's Concert in Bangladesh as well. And then he's played on albums by John, George, Ringo, Roy Orbison, Tom Petty, I think. No, that's not true. But the Trevor Mulberry's, he was on that album. I just think he's one of the most talented session drummers we've ever had, and really deserves way more credit. And, you know, in this year of 72, John did have Phil Spector producing his album, New York City. And so it makes sense on this concert you have two drummers, because that creates this really cool wall of sound effect when you got two different drummers going on. But anyway, yeah, the song New York City is so perfect to start off this concert with. It's such an underrated song, and John Lennon was so, in my opinion, foolish not to release that as the single from the album. I mean, it could have been a top 10 hit. Instead, here at least a very controversial song that I will talk about later. But anyway, the third track of the concert is It's So Hard, one of my favorites from the Imagine album. This is great sort of blues rocker, all about the struggles of life, and also uses great sexual innuendo. It's so hard, it's really hard, it's hard to get hard. Sometimes I feel like going down. You gotta eat, you gotta sleep, you gotta keep your woman satisfied. But it's so hard. Sometimes I feel like going down. But when it's good, it's really good. And when I hold you in my arms, baby, sometimes I feel like going down. Great saxophone on that song. I adore the studio version on the Imagine album. Sad fact, King Curtis played the sax on the version of that song on the Imagine album. And then sometime later, he was stabbed to death. But anyway, let's get back to the actual concert. Because next we have the first of several Yoko Ono songs with lead vocals. And this is the cringy part of the whole film / concert. This is the only song by Yoko at the concert that I kind of like. I mean, it's okay. The others by her, I think, are just terrible. This one is okay. I can dig it, kind of. It's called Move On Fast. That's all I'm gonna say about it. I like the beat to it. I like the horns, the guitar. That's about all I can say. Her singing isn't that bad. But, you know, I want to be clear here. I want to be honest with you all. I'm not one of those Yoko haters that hates everything she does and did and blames her for the breakup and blames her for everything that's bad. I'm not one of those people. I'm also not a big lover of Yoko Ono that much. I'm more in the middle between. I have more nuanced views of hers. But I don't like her music from the New York City album. I like her songs on the Double Fantasy album, but I don't much care for her songs on this album. Anyway, then we get to John giving us some sort of proto-grunge rock and roll with the song Well, Well, Well from his debut album, Plastic Ono Band. Another song with some great sexual innuendo when he sings, I took my love out to dinner. She was so beautiful, I could eat her. I did. I did not know what in the world that meant when I was 15, 16 years old, but I think I know what it means now. Again, this concert is so great because obviously it was the only concert John Lennon did after the Beatles broke up, for reasons I'll mention later. And he really gives you all kinds of songs on this album. You know, later on singing a vulnerable song called Mother, and then here just, you know, rocking out with sexual lyrics and songs that are really relevant topically in the news. It's going to be a great variety of John Lennon's music. And again, next we get to another Yoko song that I think is just terrible, called Born a Prison, where she's basically singing and saying that all of life is a prison, school is a prison, childhood is a prison, all of life is a prison. It's just, again, just terrible, terrible lyrics, terrible song. The only good part of it is, you know, the music in the background is good. If there were different lyrics, it'd be a lot better. But it's just terrible. I mean, come on. I know that in 72, John and Yoko were trying to be like radical, hippie, activist with their music. But in most of those songs, it just sounded so tone deaf and so juvenile, like this song. I mean, if you really think all life is a prison and, yeah, it's it's not that I completely disagree with that, but school is not a prison. School is not a prison. That's really absurd to say that. Anyway, then we get to one of the best parts of the concert film, because John brings back a Beatles song to perform. And I find it very fascinating that Come Together is the Beatles song he chose to perform live. Because Come Together actually started out as a political campaign song. In '69, Timothy Leary was going to run for governor against Reagan, ironically, and he wanted John to write him a campaign song that was going to be called Come Together, because that was his campaign slogan. But then, of course, Timothy Leary got arrested for having drugs, and there was no point in having a campaign song anymore. So then John Lennon made that into a Beatles song, and filled it with all these nonsense words that had nothing to do with Timothy Leary or politics at all. And it was Paul who really got him to change the arrangement of the song, so it didn't sound like he was copying Chuck Berry and You Can't Catch Me with that first lyric that is Chuck Berry lyric. But yeah, I was 15 when I got the John Lennon compilation album, the very best of Working Class Hero, and this live version was on there. So I've known this live version ever since I was 15. And I love how at the end he even says, I nearly got all the words right, didn't I? And then in the film you see him say, I really should stop writing all those daft lyrics. Because of course Come Together is full of just nonsense words and nonsensical lyrics that mean nothing. Toe jam, football, juju, eyeballs. Doesn't mean anything about anything. And then, of course, John says to the audience, now this song is why we're all here, and goes to the keyboard and plays one of the greatest songs ever, Imagine. Imagine was a huge song for me growing up. I took that to heart, and I guess you could say that really informed my political views. If you look at the lyrics of Imagine, it's really John trying to imagine, and really the lyrics are all about a communist world, because he's singing about no countries. Well, if there were no countries, there would be no borders, and no borders would also mean no states, would it not? So that would be a world under communism. Now, I doubt John Lennon would have said he was a communist, but that's basically what he's singing. But Imagine is a brilliant song, no matter what it's about, really. And not only is that song in the concert part of the film, but at the very end of the end credits, Imagine is played again with these videos of children at this carnival, I think, where there's a clown or something. It's just lovely, lovely videos of children. And then we get to another very unfortunate, bizarre Yoko Ono song, which I think was the B-side of Cold Turkey. I'm not sure about that. It's called Open Your Box. And my God, it's so bad. It seems like a song that would have come out 20 or 30 years later from some hip-hop star or rapper. Because it's obviously about sex. You can't possibly deny that. It's just, open your box, open your legs, open your trousers. I don't know what they were thinking with that. Again, the band was pretty good. I will say with these Yoko songs, the music in the background is good, but the lyrics are just terrible. Sounds like a 10-year-old wrote them. And then we get to John Lennon's second single as a solo artist to be released, Cold Turkey. Of course, the song about him quitting heroin and quitting heroin, Cold Turkey. And ironically, it was the second single as a solo artist for him, and he got Ringo playing drums on it, and Eric Clapton on guitar, and Klaus Forman on bass on the studio on the single version, obviously not on this live version. But I've always had a love for this song, and John is just belting it out here, and just it's an achingly great performance from John. But I also want to mention a song that's not on the live album but is in the film, and that's Mother, the classic opener from John Lennon's debut album, Plastic Ono Band, where John Lennon is revealing his traumatic childhood because his parents weren't there for him. And that's really a long story that I'm not going to do right now about his mother not being a fit parent and his dad not being there for him. Although really it was because his mother and his aunt didn't like his dad and didn't want him there for him. That's another story. But Mother is just, it's an achingly beautiful performance from John. And even better in the film because you see the pain in his face when he's singing this. But John Lennon is just amazing in this concert. Not only in terms of singing, but I love his little banter and comments in between songs. The way he'll say, I'm glad you enjoyed the rehearsal. Things like that. And then we get to another Yoko song that I tolerated, but I don't think it's that great, called Don't Worry Kyoko. A song referencing her daughter that her ex-husband just abducted despite her having custody of her. And again, you know, I like the drumming and the guitar and the horns during this, but her singing doesn't really help the song at all. But then we get to John performing one of his all-time favorites from the 1950s, and that's the song Hound Dog, which he and everybody else knew because Elvis Presley. And I much prefer John Lennon to Elvis Presley, so I prefer his version of the song to Elvis's. Hound Dog is great, and then of course, in the middle of it, John just says, "I love you, Elvis, I love you," which is ironic because we now know that a year or two before this, it was Elvis Presley himself who went to Richard Nixon and then told him that John Lennon was a bad influence on the young people of America. And that's what led to Richard Nixon trying to get John Lennon deported from America because he thought that if John Lennon influenced the youth to be against the war in Vietnam and against Richard Nixon, that would mean he would lose the next election. But I really doubt that John knew about all that. And then we get to one of the weirdest parts of this whole concert film. Yoko reads a letter of a speech given by a politician, and then it turns out the politician was Adolf Hitler. And she's reading this accompanied by, of course, the band jamming out. I have no idea why she thought that was a good idea. And then, of course, they end the show with the encore of all encores, Give Peace a Chance, with special guests. And those special guests are Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder is here. Stevie Wonder is there doing Give Peace a Chance. It's an amazing way to end the show. And then you see so many people that John Lennon knew at that point come out on the stage and just like play tambourine and just walk around. You see Phil Spector, Alan Klein, his lawyer, Leon Wilds. It's really lovely. So yeah, this was an incredible film to see in the theater twice. The first time was last week, and there were about 5-6 people in the auditorium. Yesterday in the city was fantastic, because I think there were about 18-20 people in that theater. I really do wish it was still showing. Yeah, my favorite part of this was Instant Karma, because that's tied for my favorite John Lennon song. It's a three-way tie, really. Instant Karma I love so much. It was his third single as a solo artist. I was trying to get up from my seat and dance a little bit to that one during the movie. And I do want to talk about the political aspect of this film and this political time in John Lennon's life and Yoko Ono's life. After the Beatles broke up, John really got into radical activism, not just with the Bed In for Peace, but then in 1970 he did this thing with Tariq Ali, a radical activist. And then in 71, when they moved to America in New York City, they became friends with Jerry Rubin and Bobby Seale and other radical activists like them. And they had that whole song and benefit for John Sinclair, this guy who was arrested for a few joints. And in 72, John Lennon and Yoko Ono were writing these political protest songs like Attica State, about the Attica State prison riot. And I should mention also that at this point John Lennon had become interested in feminism because of Yoko and became a male ally of women's rights, and then wrote this feminist anthem song, "Woman is the N-word of the world," which obviously was controversial then and is more controversial now because it's not in the film, although it was in the concert, and it's not on the album, although it was in the concert. Now, I love that song. I think any song that extols that comments on the oppression of women is important, even though the title of it is very messy. And you could certainly argue that, a white man like John shouldn't use that word, the N-word. And now, if you watch the documentary from a year ago, 1 to 1, it's clear that in this time, John Lennon was planning to do a whole tour of concerts like this one to raise awareness for political issues. And now he did not do that because he knew that Richard Nixon was spying on him to try and get him deported. And obviously more concerts would have risen the ire of Nixon, who was trying to get him deported. But God, what a shame that we were deprived of an actual tour of John Lennon as a solo artist because of Richard Nixon. Not that it's the worst thing Richard Nixon did as president, but denying us John Lennon on tour, God. So I just want to put that out there. And that maybe if not for Richard Nixon spying on Lennon, we would have gotten more political stuff from Lennon, although I will say it's not his best material. I much prefer the material from John where he's singing about his own life and his own thoughts than trying to be some political journalist. But yeah, it's really incredible that we've had 2 Beatles-related concert films, or no, I mean films in the theater so far this year. Paul McCartney's Man on the Run documentary in February, and now Power of the People, John Yoko Live New York City. And despite my issues with the Yoko portions of this film, I was still absolutely thrilled because it's so great as a young person in this 21st century, getting to experience concerts and getting to experience the really great music back from the 70s and 60s in these kinds of movies. I mean, there's nothing like this music nowadays. So I always just feel so special and so honored when I can experience it in film. And I'm hoping that somehow we'll be surprised and we'll get a third Beatle-related film this year. Maybe they'll finally give us the George Harrison Concert in Bangladesh in a restored, remastered film. I know it already exists, but I want to get it in the theaters. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the Power of the People film. And I wish there were more concerts with John in the 70s and more films with John. It's really too bad. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to the video.